In the fall of 1997, a school shooting in Pearl, Mississippi was the first in a cluster of school shootings which would end with Columbine 18 months later. Though not the first school shooting of the 90s, Pearl was quickly followed by one in West Paducah, Kentucky, then in Jonesboro, Arkansas in March of 98, then Pennsylvania in April of 98, Springfield, Oregon a few months later, and Columbine in April of 1999, cementing school shootings as a regular occurrence in the American psyche. This video will delve into why Luke Woodham, a 16-year-old student at Pearl High School, killed his mother, drove to the school, and shot and killed 2 students and injured 7 more. It will also cover how the assistant principal retrieved his firearm and stopped Luke, and how the community and media dealt with the devastating crime. Most of the information in this video comes from the book If Only I Had Known by William Dodson, who was the superintendent of Pearl schools at the time of the shooting. It has accounts from the assistant principal who stopped Luke, teachers, a juror for one of Luke's trials, and from Dodson himself. Pearl is a small city close to Jackson, the capital of Mississippi. Incorporated in 1973, by the 1990s, Pearl was an affluent, growing community with a low crime rate and a predominantly white population. The school system there had one high school, Pearl, which earned high test scores and had about 1,000 students. Luke Woodham was born in 1981. His parents argued often and divorced when he was in 6th grade. His father was not present in his life after the divorce, and Luke lived with his mother. Luke had one older brother who was not living in the house around the time of the shooting, so only Luke and his mother lived in their house. According to Luke, his mother was verbally abusive and blamed him for the divorce. His mother also dated other men and was often away from home, which further upset him. Early in grade school, Luke was a normal, upbeat student who performed well academically. One source said he had an IQ of 116, and he even helped students who were struggling. His mother was supportive during this time. However, Luke was shy, overweight, wore glasses, and beginning in kindergarten, he was frequently bullied. The bullying grew worse over the years, including physical bullying. His older brother also picked on him. He was called names because of his weight, such as chunky and tubby, was seen as weird by his classmates, and bullies jumped him many times. Whenever he tried to fight back, he would be punished just as harshly as the bullies. In fact, the bullying was so bad that his bus driver would have Luke sit behind her to protect him from bullying. Luke's academic performance declined as the bullying increased, and by 9th grade he was failing, and he had to repeat the grade. During this time, Luke's school papers became dark and violent, explicitly alluding to mass murder and torture. He wrote in one paper about a scenario where if he was his teacher for a day, he would kill all of the other teachers, torture the principals to death, and then take his own life. Luke had been rejected by girls multiple times, but he briefly dated a girl at Pearl named Christina Menifee, who felt bad for him because he had no friends. Though their relationship was short-lived, he told her that he loved her and said that it was the first time in his life that somebody had loved him and he had loved them back. However, Luke tried to prevent her from hanging out with her friends. Luke's mom went with them on their dates, and, like Luke, his mom was very controlling. Christina broke up with him a year before the shooting. The breakup devastated Luke, and he almost took his own life. Luke then met another student, Grant Boyette. For this section, there are contradictory accounts about the Kroth Gang. I'll point out where sources have differences. Grant Boyette was several years older than Luke. At the time of the shooting, he was attending a community college, but he had previously attended Pearl High School. Boyette came from a well-respected family in the area. His mother was a teacher at a nearby school, and his dad was a military recruiter. He attended Sunday school, and he was known for being quiet, polite, and very religious. While at Pearl, he would lower his head and pray before eating. However, in more private settings, he had a completely different personality. His friends described him as manipulative, Machiavellian, and short-tempered, to the point of grabbing someone's neck if they did something he didn't like. He had interest in Satanism, the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, and idolized Hitler for his ability to influence and control others. He had previously been bullied, and rumor had it that Boyette became interested in Satanism after a breakup. He also believed that females were inferior to males and liked to play role-playing games with friends, except he always preferred violent actions and wanted evil to triumph over good. His short temper and tendency to choose violence in games caused some of his friends to stop hanging out with him. Boyette was the head of the Kroth Gang, as the book calls it. There were 7 members total, all male, and they usually met at Luke's house to play video games and role-playing games, or talked about philosophy and read books. Luke began reading classic works like Aristotle and books about astrophysics, and the group saw themselves as scholars who had been mistreated because society valued athletics and social status more. Boyette was fascinated by Nietzsche's idea of the madman, which the book describes as someone who is seen by others as crazy, but is a free thinker who has a better understanding of the world than others. It's not known where the name Kroth came from, though there are theories. One was from a website for Dungeons & Dragons, and another was from a different role-playing game online where the world was called Kroth. A friend of Boyette's who had graduated from Pearl in '97 said that he and Boyette had played a role-playing game in '96 that featured the Krath, an evil group from Star Wars comic books. The game was set up to have players start as evil and change to good over time, but Boyette chose evil actions every time. He called his character Che Guevara and his spaceship Noriega, probably after the dictator of Panama. The friend got sick of the way Boyette played and stopped hanging out with him, and Boyette went on to create a role-playing game with Luke and other members of Kroth. The book refers to the Kroth group as a youth gang due to the criminal activity it was involved in, while many media reports from the time described it as a cult, playing up talk of Satanism, as this was the 90s and the Satanic Panic was still around. The Satanic Panic was a widespread fear which started in the 80s with the belief that devil-worshipping cults were sprouting up and committing crimes. However, school administrators said there were no cult or drug connections. The gang did not have any rituals, rites, or initiations typically associated with cults. Luke's manifesto did not mention Satan or Satanism. Boyette did have at least some interest in Satanism, though. He declared to the group that he was their father, and that his real father was Satan, who gave orders to him, and he gave them to the group. Boyette also set up a hierarchy within the gang that changed over time, but Boyette was always at the top. Boyette pushed the Kroth Gang in the direction of revenge and obtaining money and possessions, hatching various schemes I'll go into. He demanded that the group keep the discussions and plans secret, and punish members if they did not run everything by him. They created a list of enemies to get revenge against, and Christina was Luke's greatest enemy, according to another member of the gang. Boyette attempted to recruit more to his gang, telling them that if they weren't with him, they were against him, and those who were against him would be dead. In early January of '97, 10 months before the shooting, Luke went to Boyette, seeking a break from the constant bullying. Sources vary on exactly how, but Boyette taught Luke to pray to Satan and cast a spell for Luke to address his bullying problem. The next night, Luke found out that one of his bullies had been fatally hit and run over by a car. Boyette had nothing to do with it. The death was an accident. The bully had been wearing all black at night on a busy road. Luke believed that what Boyette had instructed him to do had worked, saw it as an important life event, and grew closer to Boyette and more interested in Satanism. Starting in January, Luke and Boyette developed a close relationship. One member of the Kroth said the two thought they were smarter than the others and pushed the other members away. Some members said that Boyette had possessed Luke through spells and focused more of his effort on manipulating Luke than the others, likely because he was vulnerable after years of bullying, a troubled home life, and a crushing breakup. They also said Luke became more bold, confident, and cruel as Boyette spent more time with him. Luke said he had trouble sleeping when he disagreed with Boyette because of demons. The Pearl police said that in January, the Kroth Gang had started making plans to attack the school. An investigator testified that the plans involved napalm, cutting telephone lines to the school, each member shooting their specific enemies, and then running away to someplace else, like Mexico or Cuba, and picking up odd jobs. The plans changed throughout 97. The final version had Luke as the gunman, shooting up both Pearl High School and the nearby junior high. Lawyers claimed this was simply teenagers making things up, and they weren't serious plans. Some of the Kroth said the same thing, treating the plans like another role-playing game. Luke had a dog, a Shih Tzu named Sparkle. A girl on Luke's bus said that Luke would worry about his dog's well-being while he was at school. This was probably before Boyette had a strong influence over Luke, because according to Luke, he and Boyette began beating Sparkle. In April, they beat the dog so badly it was limping. Luke's brother noticed and told Luke that he was going to call the vet. Scared of getting into trouble, Luke called Boyette, who came over to his house. They took Sparkle into the woods and brutally tortured the dog until it died, which included setting it on fire, putting it in a book bag, and tossing the bag into a pond. A few days later, Luke wrote down what happened, detailing all of the horrible things they did to her, expressing pleasure in what they had done, calling it a true beauty. Another member of Kroth was Donald Brooks. Luke worked with him at Domino's. Boyette told Brooks to steal his dad's credit card to buy a Nintendo 64 and other electronic devices worth thousands of dollars. The credit card company contacted Brooks' dad because of the large amounts, and his dad found out what was going on with his son and Kroth. Brooks left the gang, letting the others know he had come back to Christianity, and even called his pastor to confess. According to Brooks, Boyette then planned to murder his dad. In June of 97, Brooks and his dad brought everything they knew about Kroth to the Pearl police and gave proof of the Kroth's plot to attack the school. However, the police said they didn't know about plans to attack the school until after the shooting in October. A different source claimed that the Kroth had never been a cult. Justin Sledge, who was part of the group, has said that he never knew what the word Kroth meant or where it originated. He said he had never been in any cult, did not know of any cult, and that some of the boys in the supposed cult were not even familiar with each other. The three other members of the group did not show up as much in my sources. Delbert Shaw had been in trouble for fighting and lighting firecrackers in mailboxes, and in school was known to talk about the devil and claimed that he could make a bomb. He rode to school with Lucas Thompson, another member of the group. The final member was Wesley Brownell, who said he had left the group several months before the shooting. September 30th, 1997, in the evening. Luke was 16 at the time. Over the phone, he told Lucas Thompson how he was going to kill his mother the next day. Thompson did not believe that he was actually going to do it, but Luke made preparations. He disconnected his mother's phone and put it in a closet so she couldn't call 911. Luke's mother woke up early in the morning on October 1st. Luke started beating his mother with a baseball bat when she was in the hallway. His mother retreated to her room, where Luke stabbed her 7 times, including in the heart and both lungs. She died about a half an hour later. His mother did have defensive wounds to her hands and arms. He put a pillow over his mother's face, which usually means the killer feels remorse, according to an investigator. The reason Luke ended his mother's life was to use her car. He did not have a license, had little experience driving a car, and had poor eyesight, so his mother was very strict about him driving, and she usually drove him to school. Luke gave differing accounts about why he simply didn't tie her up instead. At one point he said he never thought to tie her up, and at another said his plan had been to tie her up, but Boyette ordered Luke to kill her instead. Luke was on the phone with Boyette when Thompson called Luke to see if he had did it. Luke said he had, sobbing. Thompson still did not believe him. Luke then wrote his manifesto and added more of his writings, including about how he had killed his dog with Boyette. It totaled 5 pages. He drove to Pearl High School in his mom's white Chevy Corsica a little before 8 a.m., with the emergency brake on the entire time. Luke went into the school commons, a large area where students gathered before classes started. Hundreds of students were there. Columns made of concrete supported the tall ceiling. He wore a thigh-length coat even though the weather was mild. He scanned the area to locate his targets and gave his writings to Justin Sledge, who then hid in the library. Luke later said he told Sledge to give his writings to Boyette. Luke exited the school, walked back to his car, then returned to the Commons area. Shortly after 8 a.m., he walked up to Christina Menifee, the girl who had broken up with him a year ago and was considered Luke's main enemy in the Kroth. He pulled a .30 caliber lever-action hunting rifle with a .2 magazine from under his coat, and at close range shot her in the neck, killing her. Next to Christina was her friend, Lydia Dew. Luke shot her in the back, and she would later die from her wounds. Luke did know Lydia and had taken her to prom, but he did not give a reason for shooting her. She likely had been at the wrong place at the wrong time. Violence was so rare at Pearl that many people nearby assumed the first gunshot was something more innocent. The assistant band director, who had seen Luke earlier that morning, thought that a member of the ROTC had accidentally discharged their firearm. One student thought the shot was a firecracker, and whoever set it off was in deep trouble. A counselor also thought she had heard a firecracker. Another student thought the shot came from a cannon that was fired when the school scored a touchdown in some sort of senior prank. When Luke fired for the second time, someone yelled that it was a gun, and everyone fled. For the next 10 minutes, Luke fired at others in the Commons, most of them at random, injuring 7, as hundreds of students ran away. Most of the injured were struck by shrapnel from bullets hitting the concrete floor. One student, Alan Westbrook, was either protecting his girlfriend or had tripped and fallen when he was hit, sources vary. Luke shot him in the back several times, which paralyzed him for months. Luke said that Alan had always picked on him, and that's why he fired multiple times. During the shooting, Luke paused to apologize to a student named Jerry, who he had wounded in the leg. Luke told him that he didn't mean to shoot him because Jerry had never done anything to him, but had thought he was a different student, Kyle Foster, the son of the mayor. Kyle was not at the school at the time because he was stuck in traffic. Luke wanted to shoot the mayor's son for more news coverage. The student who thought the shots were a senior prank, Robbie Harris, was wounded in the leg. He did not know Luke. At some point, while Luke was reloading, a student made an attempt to tackle him, but Luke got away. Luke's rifle then jammed. He tried to fix it, was unable to, and fled the school. The assistant principal of Pearl was Joel Myrick. The book has a chapter where, in his own words, he explains how he confronted Luke. Joel was near the Commons when the shooting started. While students ran past him to get away from the danger, Joel moved closer and saw Luke shoot several students. One of them, who was hiding behind a column, moved out of cover in front of Luke, holding his backpack in front of him, screaming at Luke not to shoot. Luke fired and hit him in the stomach, and 2 more students hiding by the column darted away. Luke fired at them, but hit the floor, peppering them with shrapnel. Luke stopped to reload his rifle. Myrick considered charging Luke because his back was to him, but the Commons area was large and mostly open. If Luke spotted him, he would be caught without cover. Instead, Myrick ran through the Commons and out the exit door to retrieve his gun from his truck. At the time, Myrick was a National Guard unit commander in the artillery. He always kept his service weapon, an officer's .45 caliber Colt handgun, close by. He loaded his gun, which felt wrong to him on school grounds, and moved to the opposite side of the school, not sure if the shooter had seen him. Outside of the school, there were students everywhere. Those who had escaped the Commons had made it to their cars or were standing in various places. Afraid of hitting any of them, Myrick kept his safety on. Before he could make it back inside the school, Luke came out of the doors in front of him. Myrick ordered Luke to stop. He wrote that he saw everything in slow motion as Luke noticed Myrick but continued walking to his mother's car, which had 2 of its tires on the sidewalk, got in, and started it. Close by was a stop sign at the parking lot's exit. A right turn from there led to a 4-lane highway in the direction of an elementary school where classes were in session and Myrick's son attended. The emergency brake was still on, and the rear tires smoked and skidded across the parking lot. Myrick ran after the car. Another car was at the stop sign, and Luke honked at it. Myrick recounts that this car was unaware of who was behind him, but the author of the book said that a student intentionally blocked Luke with his car, which helped Myrick to stop Luke. Either way, Luke had to back up and drive around this other car, which bought Myrick time to run ahead, past the stop sign, and down the road to the right. He knew he had to stop Luke from escaping, took the safety off, looked to make sure the background was clear in case there were any misses, put his finger on the trigger, and mentally prepared to shoot. Luke turned right and drove down the road Myrick was guarding. Luke saw Myrick and steered off of the road opposite where Myrick was. It was still early in the morning, and dew clung to the grass. The wet ground, combined with the emergency brake, caused the car to get stuck in the grass near Myrick. Myrick pointed his gun at Luke's head and threatened to shoot him if he moved. Luke's breathing was heavy, his glasses rested unevenly on his nose, he had electrical tape on his hands, and his rifle was on the passenger seat. Myrick approached him and opened the car door. As he did this, Luke's face appeared to morph from insane and ready to explode to a normal, awkward teenager. He then almost felt bad for pointing a gun at him. Myrick had Luke get out of the car and lie on the ground. He checked for more weapons, but didn't find any. Myrick asked him, "Why are you killing my kids?" And he replied, "The world has wronged me, and I couldn't take it anymore." Myrick said, "Wait till you get to Parchman Penitentiary." A police car pulled up right after that, and the officer asked Myrick if he knew the identity of the shooter. Myrick said he didn't, but Luke said, quote, "Oh, you know me, Mr. Myrick. I'm the guy who gave you the discount on the pizza last week." In response, Myrick screamed. Then he took the ammo out of his gun and ran back to the school. Some students and teachers were still hiding inside the school, and others began to come out. Myrick checked on Christina and Lydia, but they were both gone. In a daze, he followed a trail of blood to a different building and found a group of students, one of them wounded, and then he wandered around the campus. Police, medics, parents, and reporters showed up. Myrick spotted Lydia's mom and tried to take her to her daughter, but another teacher led her away. Going back inside the commons, which was filling up with police and officials, he could still smell the propellant from the rifle and waved flies away from the deceased. After putting his gun away, officers recognized him as the one who stopped the shooter and asked him to head to the station to give his statement. At the station, Myrick relayed what happened to him in a room right next to the one that held Luke. The police detective called him a hero, but he didn't feel like one. Myrick noted that the detective, along with everyone else who saw him, seemed to pity him. He headed back to the school, dodged a reporter, and found out that the victims had been removed from the commons and prisoners were cleaning up the blood. An officer told him he was requested for a meeting of school administrators, where Myrick met Dotson, the superintendent and author of If Only I Had Known. They worked on a plan on how to handle the tragedy and media attention, and officials took questions from reporters. Not long after the shooting, Luke confessed his crimes on camera to a police detective. He cried over how his mother had belittled him and blamed him for the issues in their family.
She blamed me for my dad leaving. She blamed me for my brother hating her.
He incorrectly claimed to have shot Christina in the heart, sobbing while explaining he loved her and how she would flirt with other boys after their breakup. He went over how he gave his manifesto to Sledge, telling Sledge to give it to Boyette, and Luke thought he was going to be pretty famous. He talked about how he had been bullied, others would call him gay, and his older brother would beat him up.
It all built up inside of me over time. People always picked on me, they always called me gay and stupid stuff like that.
Luke recounted which students he had hurt, like Alan Westbrook, the one he shot multiple times, and Jerry, the one he apologized to, along with how Myrick stopped him. He said he was not insane, only angry. The entire recorded confession is available on the WLBT article I have linked in the description. Superintendent Dotson had decades of experience as a school administrator. He had broken up many fights and dealt with student walkouts and upset parents in Mississippi, where there was a lot of conflict related to racial tensions. But he had never encountered anything like the shooting. Dotson did not personally know Luke and was not at the school at the time of the shooting. He rushed to the school when he heard the news and found it flooded with police and curious bystanders. Inside the commons, he saw the deceased victims. A counselor told him she had been very concerned about Luke, but didn't think he would do something like this. The principal, who had started the job only a few months earlier, told him that Myrick had caught the shooter. The first question for Dotson at the first news conference was why the assistant principal had a gun on the school campus. He also called the parents of all the student victims and asked them to meet him in person. Classes were canceled for the rest of the week. The shooting made national headlines. Reporters flocked to the school, interviewing anyone they could. One student who witnessed Myrick chasing after the car with his handgun was interviewed 4 times just at the school. Cameras were aimed at students' faces, and reporters called students' houses. Later on, CBS 48 Hours would show up at Pearl's homecoming game and interviewed the homecoming queen. On the same day of the shooting, Sledge went to a local news outlet, WLBT, where he read some of the manifesto on camera, adding that Luke's actions could never be justified. Sledge said he was doing this so everyone could know the truth. The interview can be found in the WLBT article. In the manifesto, Luke said his actions were more than just anger over Christina breaking up with him. His attack was a last resort act of revenge against society after society had treated him poorly for so long. Quote, "I killed because people like me are mistreated every day. I do this to show society, push me, and we will push back." He said he had suffered all his life, no one loved him, and no one cared for him. He mentioned how he was bullied and asked Boyette to read a section of The Gay Science, a book by Nietzsche, to the world. In addition, Luke included a will where he gave his belongings to Boyette and Thompson, a short section on philosophy where he encouraged anyone who had been tortured by humanity to hate humanity and God, live by your own rules, and become a Superman, another concept from Nietzsche. The last section was Luke's account about how he and Boyette tortured and killed his dog back in April. The day after the shooting, students held a vigil to pray. Sledge showed up there and tried to explain Luke's actions, upsetting the students. He was suspended for 5 days. Unlike Sledge, Boyette kept a lower profile. He gave an interview and said Luke was very intelligent, he occasionally played video games with him, and at times helped him out. The police investigation quickly discovered the group of friends around Luke, and investigators interviewed them. Less than a week after the shooting, all 6 of the other Kroth members were charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Boyette and Brooks were also charged with planning to kill Brooks' dad. The conspiracy charges were later dropped for 5 of the members, including Boyette, because the district attorney believed the conspiracy charge would be a challenge to prove in court, and so were the charges about Brooks' dad. The remaining Kroth member, Thompson, who had called Luke on the evening and morning before the shooting, was 16, and his case went to the youth court and is sealed. Boyette pleaded guilty to a different conspiracy charge for preventing a public officer from discharging their duties. His sentence was 6 months at a prison boot camp and 5 years of probation. Sledge was sent to a reformatory school for 4 months. All Kroth members were banned from the school. Rumors grew about a satanic cult and rituals with the arrests of the other Kroth members. The satanic panic came to Pearl in the wake of the shooting. Newspapers, citing prosecutors, led their stories by connecting Kroth and Boyette to a cult. Someone left a note at the memorial declaring that, quote, "Luke is God." This fueled more speculation. The district attorney said there was satanic activity in the area and the Kroth were anti-Christian. When another school shooting happened 2 months later in West Paducah, Kentucky, there were lots of rumors about a connection to a satanic cult and the shooter's religious beliefs. Before his trials, Luke, with the help of his lawyers, released an interview and statement where he apologized to the families of the 2 girls he killed and claimed Boyette had told him to go on the rampage. Luke had 2 trials, the first one for his mom and the other for the students at Pearl. A juror on the second trial gave her accounts in the book. She said so many potential jurors requested to be excused from the jury, another round of jury summons were sent out. The jury was sequestered for the trial, and reporters followed them everywhere. When they ate at a restaurant, a waitress asked for their autographs. In the courtroom, Luke's appearance and demeanor gave her the impression of a plain, pitiful boy, not the monster that she was expecting. Luke pleaded innocent by reason of insanity for all charges. In both trials, he attempted to portray Boyette as the driving force behind his crimes. He recounted how Boyette introduced him to Satanism, how the bully died from being hit by a car after they cast a spell, and how Boyette manipulated Luke to become harsh, violent, and more confident. Luke said he felt rejected by everyone except Boyette, who told him he was spineless if he didn't get revenge on Christina. On the morning of the attack, Luke claimed he saw demons who told him to attack the school and also heard Boyette's voice. Brooks testified that someone had to have helped Luke plan out his actions on that day because Luke struggled to follow instructions when they worked together. One psychologist who interviewed Luke said he was very psychologically disturbed, might have borderline personality disorder, was taken advantage of by Boyette, and not able to judge right from wrong. Another psychologist said that Luke did not have a severe mental illness, did not see any demons, was not delusional, but did have narcissistic personality traits. The juries found Luke guilty in both trials, and he was given 3 life sentences for the murder convictions, along with 7 20-year sentences for the students he injured. Luke said he deserved the death penalty. He won't be eligible for parole until he is 65. Dotson visited Luke in prison in 2007 and 8. Luke talked to him about how he was bullied and punished when he fought back. He cried while talking about it. When asked why he did it, Luke said satanic worship and Boyette were the causes. While in prison, Luke had given up following Satan, became a Christian, started reading the Bible, and took classes about Christianity. Christina's father forgave Luke in a letter, and he apologized in response. Joel Myrick suffered from nightmares and severe stress for months after the shooting. He continued his career in education and has expressed opposition to efforts pushing to arm teachers and administrative staff on school campuses. He instead supports placing armed and trained personnel at schools to deter shootings. There are several smaller details I picked up on in my research. One was that the bully who died when he was hit by a car, Rocky Brewer, had an illegitimate child who was born after the accident, and there was a legal battle over who would receive the payout from the wrongful death lawsuit against the driver of the car. The date of judgment by the appeals court was October 1st, 1997, the day of the shooting. I found this out when trying to determine Rocky's date of death, which was January 4th of 97, marking when Luke strengthened his relationship with Boyette. Another discovery I made is that the book gets several details wrong. For one, it mentions the 1927 Bath School disaster, when a man blew up a school in Bath, Michigan. I had already researched that case and have a video about that on my channel, but the book says it happened in Maine. Another error in the book says Rocky Brewer died in June when he actually died in January. There are also multiple grammatical and spelling errors. For example, it said the 1996 Frontier Middle School shooting took place at Moose Lake, Washington, when it was Moses Lake. Justin Sledge now runs the popular YouTube channel Esoterica, where he makes videos about mysticism, philosophy, and the occult. It's not clear what Luke had intended to do if Myrick hadn't stopped him from leaving. Luke told Dotson in prison that the only thing he had planned for was shooting Christina. The Kroth had various plans to escape to another country after their attack, but Luke wouldn't have made it far without a driver's license or driving experience. I also couldn't find who owned the gun that he used. This shooting had a lot of similarities with Columbine, as pointed out in the book. Both Pearl and Columbine are upper-middle-class areas with low levels of crime, and both involved youth gangs committing lower-level crimes before the shooting. The Columbine shooters broke into cars and fired BB guns at houses, sometimes with another boy. In both cases, the police had indications that there was going to be an attack on the school and did not pursue the leads. Both cases also had 2 boys at the center. Columbine had 2 shooters, and Pearl had Luke and Boyette. And the pairs had similar dynamics. One was a charismatic leader pushing for violence, and the other was a troubled follower. All 4 were intelligent, and both of the leaders, Boyette and Eric Harris, admired Hitler, had negative views on women, were well-read, and interested in philosophy. And they happened 18 months apart, though Columbine had a larger body count, garnered more media attention, and had a lasting cultural impact, while Pearl was mostly forgotten. I had heard about this shooting before I started researching for my novel, and thought it was a case of a loner who had been bullied and carried out his crime in an act of revenge. But when I did the more in-depth research, I was surprised to find this was a much more complicated situation, involving a host of factors, from a youth gang to a breakup to a manipulative friend. Though I had seen many of the factors with other school shooters, such as the bullying, poor home life, a feeling of having been wronged, and a desire for revenge, the Kroth Gang and Boyette's influence struck me as pretty unusual. It's hard to tell how well-developed and tight-knit this group was or wasn't, considering there is contradictory evidence about its nature. Every member of the Kroth group had a reason to distort the truth since they were all arrested and charged, but I think there is some evidence this was a pretty close group, versus a loose association of boys with Boyette at the center. Luke handed his writings to Sledge right before the shooting, with instructions to give the writings to Boyette, and instead of telling a teacher or warning students, Sledge hid in the library, and afterwards went to the media. I don't think Luke would have handed his writings to a student he didn't trust. Thompson called Luke on the night before and morning of the shooting. Boyette killed the dog with Luke. Luke mentioned both Sledge and Boyette in the police interview, and Boyette and Thompson in his writings, and testified that Thompson was a good friend. In his manifesto, Luke had a line where he said that he would see Grant in the holding cell. The one I found the most trustworthy was Donald Brooks, because he went to the police months before the shooting, warning that they were planning to attack the school. If he could steal his dad's credit card because of Boyette, and then felt they were serious enough about attacking the school to alert the police, this had to be something the Kroth talked about together many times. The 2 other members of the Kroth, Shaw and Brownell, though they were charged, were barely mentioned in my sources. It's possible they were more on the fringes of the group, or left the group long before the shooting, like Brownell said he had. This could explain why some of the members didn't know each other, as Sledge claimed, while the core members of the group stayed close. The book calls the Kroth a youth gang, which I think is more accurate than a cult. The claims of a satanic cult seem to be overblown by the media and rumors around Pearl. The newspaper articles shortly after the shooting usually alluded to Satanism in the title, and had it in their opening paragraphs, emphasizing it over the other issues, probably playing into the satanic panic. Luke didn't mention Satanism in his writings or during the police interview, and he had good reason to play up how much demons and the devil influenced him at the trials, because he was trying to get a not guilty by insanity verdict. Other members did talk about spells and Boyette summoning demons, and police said that Boyette was the only member who prayed to Satan at their meetings. How much Satanism played into the group's and Luke's actions are impossible to determine, but my take is that it was limited and secondary to other factors. The key to all of these events is Boyette, in my view. I got the impression that he was a classic psychopath, able to give the appearance of a well-behaved Christian student in public, and manipulating and influencing boys into committing crimes in private. Nothing happened in Kroth without his approval, from abusing the dog to Brooks stealing his dad's credit card. He established the driving force behind the group, a grievance over society not valuing intelligence and scholarly pursuits, and a desire for revenge. If Luke had never met Boyette, I don't think he would have committed the rampage. A couple of unlikely events seem to have set everything in motion. Through pure coincidence, Luke met Boyette shortly after his girlfriend had broken up with him. Then, through even more coincidence, one of Luke's bullies died after Boyette had him pray to Satan about bullying. The years of bullying and troubled home life made Luke extremely vulnerable to someone like Boyette, and it took less than a year, from January to October, to go from those two becoming friends to the shooting. How involved Boyette was in the shooting will never be known, but given Brooks testified that Luke needed help because he struggled with directions, and Boyette had been on the phone with Luke on the morning of October 1st, I think it's likely he guided Luke, and I think this planning was done without the other Kroth members knowing ahead of time, as Boyette and Luke had been excluding the rest of the group, and Thompson didn't believe that Luke killed his mom even after he did it. A lot of coincidences had to happen for them to form a close friendship, but Boyette probably saw himself as a mastermind, conducting his followers to commit crimes for him, turning them evil, just as he made his characters in role-playing games evil. His 6-month sentence was very light, in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. The main source for this video is the book If Only I Had Known by William Dotson, who retired a few years after the shooting and continued to live in Pearl. He passed away in 2015 at the age of 77. Another source I consulted a lot is a long article by WLBT, the news outlet that interviewed Sledge. I also looked up many newspaper articles about the shooting for several of the pictures and additional details. Thank you for watching. Any feedback is appreciated. I discovered this case while researching for my novel, Tyler's Only Friend, about an active shooting at a party committed by a college student. I have links for it below, along with sources. I have more videos on my channel covering what I found in my research.